Welcome to the Follow Me podcast, where we try to encourage and equip listeners to obey the Great Commission. Today, I have a few people with me. They went on the mission trip to Nicaragua in end of June, beginning of July with the church. And so we are just going to have a fun discussion. So I'll let you each introduce yourself and I'll ask away.
All right. Well, hello. My name is Abby Ball.
And I am Jennifer Young.
My name is Jeff Harbison.
All right. Yeah. So I think I had been on mission trip in the Dominican with Jeff. We met Abby. And so Jennifer was our kind of newer one, but not new to mission trips. So first question I have for you guys is what made you decide to go, or what kind of went into the process of you deciding to go to Nicaragua this summer?
Well, I can go first. I actually did not. I did not anticipate going on the trip at first, and then Allison reached out to me via message, just to ask if I wanted to help translate on the trip. Which it was not in the cards, and it was a little bit ahead of time. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I'll think about it and I'll pray about it. And so I ended up deciding to go on the trip.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if so. Like the past two times with Dominican and with this one, so they both were delayed a year.
Yeah.
And the original years on each time, I was not planning to go originally. But something about the second year that gives me an extra time. I don't know why, but just thinking when I was thinking about other times I've been on the trips, like I've been on a couple other mission trips, and just the excitement of going down there and being able to talk to another culture and another different kind of people about Jesus, and just new things that you get to experience on the way, and the challenge that it faces. I kind of just looking forward to that is what got me wanting to go.
So you saying that you having kind of a second chance, did that play out differently in your mind? You're like, maybe I should actually consider this a little bit more, or was it like, this summer I have nothing scheduled?
Yeah, it was like I wanted to go both times the first times, but then just kind of was like, oh, well, maybe I don't have the time or the funds and stuff like that. But then it was like that second little push was just like both times were like, yeah, all right, I'm going.
Yeah. Jennifer, what about you?
I had originally gone to all the meetings for the Dominican Republic trip and the beginning ones and had prayed about it. And the next thing I knew I had a clear no. God clearly made a timing because there were other things that needed to be taken care of. And so after that, and I had already met Bob and Noemi and heard them speak at the church. So when this trip came up, it was just a very peaceful transition, if that makes sense. It was, okay, I know I'm going to do this. This is what God wants me to do. So that's how it came about.
Well, and you and the Edgels were the ones that turned in your application for the first year that we were going to go to Nicaragua before we rescheduled.
Yes.
So you were on the ball. So.
Oh, yeah, very much so. It's almost like you get those goosebumps when you start thinking about what God wants you to do. And that was really when this trip started being planned. That's how I felt. And I really knew God's push was there.
Well, and it was encouraging to me putting the trip together when I reached out to you and said, hey, if we move this trip, is that going to be okay? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm still going to be on board for it next time. Like there was no doubt, there was no question. So for me, that was like, okay, I at least have one person other than myself going next time. But and then Abby ended up being a huge blessing on the trip. I don't think I formally thanked you during the recap service, but you really came in clutch on many occasions trying to help us figure out what they were saying, or like when Noemi got sick. It was just a huge help.
Yes. I'm just glad that I, have that ability that God gave me, so that I'm able to use it, because I wasn't anticipating using it that much, but it happened, and so it worked out perfectly.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that God gave you a yes. Yes. Because it came in very handy. But okay, so then Jeff, did you have any expectations going into the trip? And then how did things measure up?
Yeah, so the only expectations I say I really had was just I knew God was going to move and do things extraordinary during this time. Just because when you go on trips like this and you're so focused on the things of God and things of the kingdom, you just kind of see a lot more and see a lot more things He's doing. So it's just kind of just expectations of what God was going to do toward this, to where He was going to challenge, the way He was going to challenge us, and just like the work that we were going to see through Him through that.
Yeah. Yep. Were your expectations met?
Oh yeah, they were exceeded. And you kind of expect them to be exceeded. You don't go into saying like, oh, maybe it'll just be like a small like little thing, but it's always something kind of blows your mind, or your expectations are met and exceeded to that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
What about you guys?
I would say with going on, I've been on several missions
Yeah.
trips, so I kind of have an expectation just going into it because I've had that prior experience before, knowing, especially in a Spanish-speaking country, I know I'll be able to communicate. So that was nice to have.
Yeah.
But then, like Jeff said, every time you go on a trip, you expect God to move, and He totally does. And I would also agree that my expectations were exceeded because you never know the ministry until you're there, and you can hear all about it from other people, but until you experience it for yourself, you don't know what it's really like.
Yeah.
And so it truly was exceeded my expectations
Yeah.
for sure.
And Jennifer had 2 years to think about it and build her expectations.
I actually kind of had a lower expectation than what actually happened because I had prepped myself for the country that we went to. Now, I'm totally going to reiterate and say I know God was going to work. That wasn't a problem. But the physical part and the just the community, I kind of set my expectations a little lower, knowing where I had been before in college and done some things. And then here, the physical settings just blew me away. The school, those were so, like, it was almost like this explosion of expectations that right at first when the kids were waiting for us when we
Yeah.
got there. And
At
so
9 p.m. and
Yes.
we were so tired. Yeah.
and the idea of everything that we were able to do, it was so much more.
Yeah.
And we knew that God worked through all of it to put us there at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like for me, I almost didn't have expectations going into it because I had never been. So I wasn't measuring it up against anything else. I knew based off of conversations with Noemi and then Sarita starting in May, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so overwhelmed. But then, like, I also knew I had the expectation when you go on a trip, you got to be flexible. Like
Yes.
you said that. And I knew that that was going to happen. And once we got there, I knew that a lot of my weight would kind of just go away because at that point we are in the hands of the missionaries. We're following them. We're serving and encouraging them, and that they were going to kind of guide us along day by day. In terms of nature, it was way different than what I was expecting. Noemi had told me, yeah, we're up in the mountains. It's like a 5-hour drive. And I was like, okay, mountains, Nicaragua. What is this? I was not expecting lush green mountains. I don't know what I wasn't expecting the Rockies, but like it was beautiful. And to be in that setting and each morning go to their upper room, being able to kind of watch the sun come up as long as it wasn't raining, which actually didn't rain that much certain days. But
For short periods.
The first day.
the first few days I feel like
Yeah.
we're good. Then
Yeah.
Sunday just took it to a different level. But yeah, so like in terms of terrain and whatnot, I didn't know what to expect, but then I was like, this is so cool. Because in the Dominican, it's hot, but we were mostly in the flat areas whenever we were there. So that was way different than what I had known and had in my mind. But so Jennifer, you kind of mentioned a little bit about community.
Yes.
So what did you think of the culture there?
I'd go back. The culture is very different as far as if you look at it from the perspective of I'll start with mothers and moms and the girls. It's really hard. They live a very difficult life. The path that basically is put forth for them is difficult because of the lack of jobs, but lack of healthcare, lack of education, but also marriages aren't real good down there. I mean, in general, that setup and you hate to say, well, it's irresponsible, men that grow up, but it is the life that they kind of live. The children don't have as bright a future as we give our kids. We think our kids are going to go to school and they're going to graduate from high school and then they can do this, this, and this. To me, there's an environment there of existence. There's kind of a heaviness of day-to-day existence. When you take food to a family and they have just prayed that God would provide them with food because they didn't have a lot of extra, how do you have an expectation of, hey, I want to go to college or I want to get this great, job? So it's kind of very suppressed. As far as that. Now, as far as the environment that they're in, we would say poor, very poor. I mean, how many of the houses did you see that had a door? So it's an existence. It's not a thriving existence like you would like to see.
Yeah. Abby, what about you?
I would just say compared to like the Dominican, because that's the most recent trip I had been on, the people in Nicaragua were a little bit more hesitant
absolutely.
to run up to you, to talk to you. And so it was a little bit different because in the Dominican, they were at the bus waiting for us, just waiting.
Jumping on your back, calling you horsey.
Right, exactly. So a little bit different. But once you earn their trust and they were very open with you. And once we went into the houses and we prayed with them, that's when they really opened up and they shared. But at first, you're going into their house and they're, they look at you and they're like, I don't know. But then when you open up and they open up, then you can see that connection. I would definitely say they're hesitant to trust you. And then once you get a little bit closer, then they open up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to it, but other than I did enjoy the culture, they were more, laid back as far as like time was. There wasn't very many time restraints, obviously, but a lot on purpose because a lot of them don't have vehicles. So
and they have to travel.
So travel time is a big deal. But just, once they did get to know you, they were very welcoming and very, very kind and giving to whatever they had. I did enjoy just the people and the way they were. So
yeah. Well, and talking to Bob and Noemi, like on the car rides up, they both expressed how different a lot of the family structures right now in the U.S. are struggling.
Yes.
But it's a different visual when you're seeing it in their culture and played out because the mothers are there, but they're not present.
Correct.
In the kids' lives a lot of times. And so the kids are still kind of fending for themselves. And then the fathers are working, and then a lot of times they'll come home and participate in drinking, or they just, don't want to partake in the family. So that was interesting to hear first and then to see it. And you're like, oh, okay. But then I think even whenever he was talking, I think Bob was telling me this, but he was saying that there were multiple girls that he kind of had to take under his wing, and they even wanted to adopt one here or there, especially one recently. But because of some of the family tensions, they had built up such big walls that even when Bob and Noemi, like two of the most loving people you're probably ever going to meet, are offering that, they just were so guarded. And, we were only there for a week, and we're like, oh, they're getting to know us. But then realistically, they're still, we didn't get to see a lot of the true culture and the true selves. But yeah, so that was kind of eye-opening and difficult to process, I think. And then just small things, like when we went to the feeding center, they put oats in the water. I'm like, oats in the water? That sounds disgusting. But it's how they get the kids extra nutrients.
Yes.
And because I think Scott said it on the documentary that, that's might be their only meal for the day is when they're coming for that soup or that rice. And so that was interesting. So if you guys have anything to add to any of that, chime in. But I feel like culture-wise, those couple of things shocked me. And you mentioned no doors on houses, but yet in my mind, I thought their houses looked nicer than what I had seen in other locations. So
There was also not a lot of trash.
yeah,
Like compared to other
Yeah.
places I had been, they took very good care of what they had. So even though they might not have had the nicest
Much,
things,
yes.
whatever they had, they were gonna treat with the best care for sure. So like the street, and there were not a lot of stray dogs. There was not a lot
Yep.
of, so that was interesting to me too.
Yeah.
It was very clean.
there was one lady that we went to pray at her house, and she had a dirt porch area, but she was sweeping it. And I think I kind of looked at Jeff and I'm like, she's sweeping her dirt porch. But like, that's still her porch, you know, that's her property, her house. She's caring for it. So even little things like that, you just don't really expect.
They were so clean. That was very noticeable to me, like walking to their houses. And we had one mom with a 55-gallon drum of water, and she's literally taking her toddler and she's dipping them
I remember
in and
that,
out
yes.
of the 55-gallon drum. And she did that to the baby that might have been 8 or 9 months old, and then the toddler was 2 or 3. And she took both of them, put them in clothes. They were not new clothes, but they were clean. You saw laundry everywhere we went.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that
Yeah.
too? There was always being laundry being done, and I thought that was really interesting that they're very conscious about that and how clean that they get stuff.
Yeah, well, after the day Tuesday where we got so muddy hiking the trails, my pants were like from knees down were completely just mud.
Yeah.
Well, when I got back, I changed off and kind of washed them off in the water, just kind of clean the mud off. And one of the girls that did most of our cooking that week, she also, I guess, is a maid, but she came over and she asked me if I wanted her to clean them, and she took me back to like the little concrete washboard thing and took me in the back with detergent, and she probably cleaned those pants better than any washing machine. Like they were, I couldn't believe she got everything out.
Yeah.
Like, it was just incredible. So.
Yeah. Another weird thing that was clean, there was a lot of pigs. Right? There were a lot of, everyone had pigs. And I also felt like they weren't that dirty. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Kind of roam.
But
Did you find it interesting how the cell phones have invaded that culture so much? I mean, everybody, even if they didn't have a door in their house much or were sweeping their porches, I found it very interesting how many cell phones and the little businesses in town that had all the Wi-Fi cards that you could buy, that they'll save up, not buy food, but they'll buy a Wi-Fi card.
yeah.
And that is invaded in their everyday culture.
Well, and that's something that Noemi like kind of warned us about whenever we got down there and prior to the trip, was that, you know, don't have your phone out too much in front of them because they're going to be really enticed by it. And, you know, I think I might have taken a couple of pictures with girls. But then they started asking me, you know, how much my phone costs and that kind of thing. You're like, oh, wow, this is strange. So, like, we don't think about that kind of stuff, but that's constantly on their radar. And then, you know, Abby, who didn't take a single picture the whole time. So
I never take pictures, so.
Well, I took a lot, but I was only asked one time about if my phone was a 14 or iPhone 14. That was the only thing they said about it. But
Yeah, I left my phone at the plant. So.
we couldn't call
I
you
was
if we needed to
communicating
translate.
with Jordan through Jeff anyway. So.
yeah,
I did use mine for Google Translate a couple times. I'm just telling you.
I couldn't figure that out. I just
I did figure it out.
called Abby or tried to use my hands to talk. But, okay. So, next question then. What did you think of Baba Noemi?
I mean, I didn't really have any expectation. I knew they were obviously missionaries, and I'd seen their picture or whatever. But as far as just seeing how much they did with what they had down there, and just over the past 20 so years or whatever, and the way they loved on everybody in that village, and yeah, it was just very impressive and very just astounding to see what God had done through them. Yeah, I can't wait. Like, yeah, thoroughly. I don't know what the word is now. I just lost it. But impressed isn't the word, but just respective, I guess. Or I have a great respect for them overall. Like,
Yeah.
really, as far as like the level of stuff they did, I was kind of like, yeah, that's like something to shoot for or to go for. So
Bob's love for those girls, particularly, because he's a father of three girls.
3 girls.
Just shone through every time he spoke. I was so impressed with how he is trying to teach them what it can be as a father trying to teach his daughters. And that to me was just it. You could just see his heart. I mean, the tears so many times just that came. And he, a couple times as we just had conversations, would just say, pray for them. And he never asked for anything for himself. His was always a prayer for a specific girl that particular day. And he says, he keeps he's hands off in a lot of it.
Yeah.
Just because he does, understands the culture and all that kind of stuff. And Noemi gives so much to everyone. So her part of being so respected in that community, you said her name and everybody knew. And that was really neat to me. I'd heard him speak here at the church, so that was something. So I'd already heard that a little bit. But just the everyday that they give to me was exhausting. And, how challenging that should be to me, to my walk. Because I know people that don't know the Lord just like they do, and how in my everyday walk I should be putting that idea in and spreading those seeds of how much God loves us just like they did in every conversation they had.
Yeah, and Bob, what was it, their 41st wedding anniversary? Is it 41st?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was that Saturday evening after we had like 3 events that day. I was tired, but it ended up being a very good.
You weren't the only one.
Yeah. Bob had a surprise anniversary party for Noemi, and he used that time to share with all the kids there what a good marriage looks like, what they should strive to look for in a relationship, that they should look to God first and then base what they're looking for off of what he says. So it was encouraging to see him trying to put that into their hearts. And, for the fellas, they're looking for a good wife. And you could just see how much he cared for the kids. And especially there were like hints at certain stories, and you knew the girl that he was talking about. And, it was just touching. And, he's crying, and he was an emotional guy. And so it was impactful just to see him be that vulnerable with us and to them, I think. But yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, so definitely the word that comes to mind for Bob and Noemi is just selfless. They're just completely selfless. I mean, their whole day just consists of doing thing to the next thing to next thing to next thing. So truly, it's a big sacrifice for both of them. And I really didn't know much about them before the trip because, I come from a different church. We hadn't supported them. And so it was really cool to just see the ministry and just, I think I mentioned this in the documentary, but just how evident their work is. Like, it's just everywhere. And from so many different stages, too. From the feeding center to the youth ministry and, the maternity home, just different stages of life. And I think Noemi mentioned how much she cared for kids, but really it was from birth, pregnancy, all the way up until, adulthood, just every aspect. She had something big going on. Yeah. And the ministry was not one-dimensional by any means because they had, people working there and helping there who had grown up in the feeding center. So that was amazing because it's like, wow, they were, just a person from the crowd, and now they're here helping serve.
Yeah. Yeah, and in really bad situations, too, they will help those kids. They bring them in, and they will help them, get their extra schooling. I know they had a couple of girls that they were trying to help with for that. And also, culture-wise, they don't go to school every day of the
No.
week. They go, what was it, Fridays and Saturdays?
Yeah, I think there's some that's like just Friday, Saturday, or something.
Yeah,
like that
and
because they have
you
to
pick
work
what you can. Yeah, because they have to work and provide for their families, and whether that's a 15-year-old girl or a 19-year-old boy, it doesn't matter. The schooling was a lot different. Random plug, but yeah. So I thought that was really cool, just how they would support them in other endeavors, but then they still had to contribute. Like, if we're going to bring you into the center
Yeah.
and into this complex and care for you, give you food, help give you education, you're going to go to our church and our Bible lessons. Like, we're going to do devotionals at 6 a.m. every morning.
Yeah.
I was unaware that was a thing until the week before we left, by the way, which is fine. Aside from that, it's like 4-hour time.
Right.
But, and then they would have to work and contribute, whether that's helping on the farm or cleaning, all that kind of stuff. Because you think about how many of the ministries we prepped for and then did, those kids were beside us the whole time. Like, they were in it. So I thought that was really cool how they were guiding kind of the process along with that. Yeah, but they were awesome.
They were.
I mean, I had never actually talked to Bob before that, but seeing his heart was really sweet. And then Noemi, we had talked so much leading up to the trip, but it was still different in person because then you got to see her tiny little self just zooming around doing everything. And you're like, okay, I understand why some of our conversations went the way that they went, because she's just like everywhere doing so many things. It was just impressive.
Yeah, my first impression of her was when we walked out of the airport, and she was just excited for us to be there. And just hugging us and just getting us on the bus because we had to go. But right before we left, she was like, "Stop, we have to pray."
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Oh my gosh.
And then she prayed literally every moment for the rest of the trip. I mean, which I guess she does every day, obviously.
Constant in prayer.
Which, as I've never seen anybody like that except for one other guy that went on a college mission trip with me, and he was one of those guys that he prayed over every single moment. Like, we got a flat tire one time just going to our little job that we had down there, and he was just like, as soon as we started changing it, he was like, "Wait, guys," he was like, "I'm gonna pray over the pray
Yeah.
for the like that." But yeah, it was just
Oh yeah. When I was getting car sick from my migraine or whatever on the drive up, she would touch my knee. She's like, "Please help Allison to feel better." And then when we went to buy corn and stuff, she's like, "Please multiply this money, Lord." And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I, you just got to strive to do that. Because it's so easy not to. It's so easy not to. But I feel like if you get into the habit, and she was such a great example of that. It's a good one, Jeff. Yeah. But, okay. Favorite moment, whether it's funny or serious.
Oh, it's hard to pick one because there's so many. But I'll say this probably isn't going to be one you'd think. But I think it was the second day we were there, maybe. Well, we started on Thursday. Then we get there on Thursday, so Friday.
Yeah.
Friday evening. I'd say this is bad, but a lot of times I did not know what was going on.
Me neither.
When they told us, when they told us hey, you're going to the village, pass out flyers, and then something with children. That's all I called. That's all I knew. And then they give us all these little small green chairs, and I'm like, why? I was like, are we giving these chairs as gifts? I thought we were giving, are we giving these out? Are these something we bought to give to so the parents have chairs for the kids? I had no idea. And so so we go into the village, and we get to I guess just a little spot, and they're the girls that were with us were put the chairs down here. I was like, just put them here? Leave them? All of them? They were like, yeah, all of them. I was like, all right, now what? And they were like, all right, come on. And I was like, okay. And so we're going around, we're passing out the flyers, whatever. Then we come back. Well, by the time we get back, all the kids in that little area had made
Yeah.
it there, and they were all sitting in chairs, and just like them going through like the little worship or like little Bible study meeting like thing was just, to me, it was a pleasant surprise. Like I just really enjoyed it just because they were so into it. They
Yeah.
were so much fun. Something I did not expect, just because I didn't have no idea, but but that was one of my favorite moments, just because it was just a nice surprise about just like, oh wow,
Yeah.
like this is kind of an incredible thing that they do every week.
Yeah. Well, and I even feel like everybody kept asking me what we were doing, but I'd be like, I don't know. Okay. Or I have a general idea.
Yeah,
We're
you
going
know.
to pass out
Yeah.
flyers, but that's as far as my knowledge
Yeah.
goes.
That
And I
was-
think
that
I got
was
to the
as far as mine
point
went.
where
I
I'm
had no
like,
idea.
I don't know. Just ask Sarah. Like, ask Sarah, because I don't know.
Well,
But
even for the youth night that I was like, and not kind of, but I was supposed to do a lot with, I had no idea what was really going on. Like I knew that I was supposed to speak the message and we were gonna have games, but then it was like a whole entire like big
Yeah.
production like that
Yeah.
they had ready for.
But again, these are things that they do on a daily, weekly basis. We weren't there to throw these special events. We plugged into their
right.
events. And that I think that was what made it cool. You know,
Yeah.
they got to show us, okay, this is what we do in our ministry. This is how we do the kids ministry on Friday nights. This is how we do youth. But we're going to throw this stuff into it.
Yeah.
You know.
It was almost like we weren't like doing something extra. It was just you're just taking over for them for
Yeah.
a little bit. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
Taking the message off their
Right.
hands or
Yeah.
taking yeah. But
Well, I can share my favorite. Well, I don't know. Again, like Jeff, like there's not a favorite moment because I loved all of it. But something that stuck out to me was the notes that they wrote to us.
those were so
yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
So before we got there, we each had an individualized note with our name written on it and a prayer, and just. I mean, it takes a lot of time to write a handwritten note and to think about what you're going to say. And then even on the last day, I received 3 notes from 3 different girls in the group. And it was so sweet because they did not have to do that.
Right.
There was no need for them to do that. Nobody asked them to do that. They decided to do it. And so that was super special. And I have them in this very safe place at my house right now. But yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
And to reiterate, there's so many different things, but one particular that comes to mind because we laughed a lot when we had gone out to the feeding center, the one that was outside of town, and then they dropped us off to go deliver. And we're going up the hills to deliver. We had a couple of the girls that were local, that walk up there, go up those hills, and in that mud and all that. So I'm going up. Well, one of the girls would not leave my side. And she kept putting her hand out to me. And Sarita was with us, and she is slipping and sliding all over because she didn't have good boots. And I had my ugly rubber boots on. And she refused to leave my side. I finally put 2 and 2 together. I'm the old person here. In this. Not old, but, in the oldest. And so I was like, I can do this. And I went slower because I knew I didn't want to fall down the hill and roll very far. And it kind of was, they had that respect was given about who to help, and it was kind of neat. We laughed a lot. The girls and I laughed as I slipped and all that, and they would give me my hand. And then as I step in the mud and almost lose a shoe, they started laughing. So we had this kind of rapport of, it was a lot of giggles and fun in a very serious situation of handing out all this food.
Yeah.
And one of my bags dropped one of the times I did it. And instead of standing there helping me, they just start laughing because they knew I had slipped in the mud. I didn't get as muddy as you did. And it isn't a particular moment. It's the laughter that you get to hear every once in a while. Those kids, when they did laugh and giggle, you knew it came from the heart because it wasn't something you saw all the time. And that kind of stood out to me, as their care for us because we kind of were their guests. But at the same time, they were doing what they had been doing all the time.
Yeah.
And appreciated. So it was just fun. And I smile when I think back on the giggles and the laugh, but also and I know that God put us there to deliver that food. But in the doing the hard thing, we were able to smile.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of a story of on the way to, delivering the food bags. I was in the back of the truck with the girls from the group, but it was just me, the only American in the back with the girls. And I was like, oh, I'll be fine. Like, no worries. But it's like, it was a 45-minute drive there.
Yeah.
And then it starts raining. And so the pole that I was holding on to is no longer stable. And I'm like, and there's 4 girls that have got me, like, they've got their arms wrapped around me. And I'm like, okay, I feel safe. But I was also like, can I sit down, please? Like, I'm going to fall. So they did that for me too.
Yeah.
They
did.
cared. They knew I, was not experienced. I
If
was going to
let
fly
this
off.
American fall, then I would be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel like my favorite moments, like you said, there's so many, but like laughter moments really stick out because there were just so many serious ones. And it's funny because the laughter moments have to deal with the Edgel girls. No surprise there. When our group, so it was Jeff, Micah, Hayden, myself, and Renita was our leader. When we delivered food the first day, first it was awesome because you people actually let me walk somewhere and I didn't have to like ride in the truck. And so I got to, get a little bit more exercise and see the streets in a different way, like from my feet, rather than a quick passing moment. And Renita actually took us up to like an area where we got to look down from a high spot on the mountain and see the complex, see over like a baseball field in a large part of the village, which was cool. But on the way back, Micah didn't bring her water. So I had my huge water bottle and trying to make sure I'm drinking enough. And she's like, I'm really thirsty. And Jeff's like, you can have a drink of Allison's water. Well, she drank the rest of my
She drank
bottle.
all of it.
And there
she
was
didn't
at
let
least
go.
half.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, this bottle is like,
Yeah,
I don't even know how many ounces that is.
Big,
But
yeah.
I mean, I was fine. It was more funny than anything because she was taking the pregnant lady's water.
And drinking it all. Not even I need a couple sips and here you go. It was
Like Jeff
this
would
is
make a
mine.
comment and okay, you're drinking a lot of water, but she wouldn't give it back. So she hands it back to me and it's empty when we get back to the complex. I'm like, well, it's a good thing I drank, ahead of time. But so that was really
Yeah,
funny.
That was funny.
And then the other one was at the baptism when it was pouring down the rain. A lot of people had left their raincoats and ponchos on the bus, and I luckily had mine in my little backpack or whatever. And so I'm unfolding it. I'm like, this thing is huge. So Cameron gets to wrap up with me in this huge poncho. And so that was just funny because we were still getting wet, but yet we remained to
poncho
stay
did nothing.
underneath of the poncho. It did a little something, but probably we weren't as wet as the rest of you guys. But yeah, so that was really funny. Yeah, but those were probably my two funny moments that stick out. Daisy was really sweet too because she took the time to ask me about the baby. And I typically don't like when people touch my belly and stuff. I feel like it's weird. And she was like, oh, when are you due? And is it a boy or a girl? Like that kind of, she was genuinely interested in asking me questions. And I was like, you're so sweet. But because a lot of other times I felt like I was doing leadership stuff and didn't get some of the personal interaction. So I appreciated her in that moment. But yeah, okay. This is different from favorite moment. Okay, it has to be most impactful moment of the trip.
Without a doubt, at the maternity home.
Okay.
Going in, not knowing what to expect, have an idea, but they kind of told us. But then walking through the maternity home, knowing that they had some issues with, bugs, other things in there, walking, seeing the new babies. But at the end, when Joy spoke, and then Sarita spoke to him, Noemi, and then at the end when we took time and we prayed with them, no doubt about it, because as we touched each of the girls, there were 2 of them in the middle that we hadn't quite reached, and that was where Noemi just kind of pushed. She's like, you've got to get over there. They have to be touched.
Mm-hmm.
And you could feel the presence of the Lord just going through that room. And, as you pray for the moms and the life that they have, you pray for those unborn babies. You pray for that home that you're blessed that they have it so they're not walking for hours in labor to a hospital. But without a doubt, that room made such an impact of they were open, and we knew several of the ladies did know the Lord, so they openly participated with prayer as we are praying and they are praying. And I said this in the documentary, but the Spirit, as the Lord was there, you could just feel that, knowing God was hearing all of us. And without a doubt, most impactful. And not just the fact that we were praying together in different languages, but the idea of that physical touch and how important that is. Outside of prayer, yes, but in prayer, that physical touch and how much it makes a difference.
They all did that. That was something
Yes.
culturally that they were just, I'm going to pray for you. When we visited the homes, you always saw those leaders touching, and, we would follow suit. And that's probably not something, at least we are that familiar with. I know some people are very, familiar with it, but at least I wasn't. So it's like a physical touch, but a spiritual touch
Yes.
also. It's like you're connecting.
Because Abby and I had that experience again when, after the ladies' day, we had one of the ladies want us to come, and she wanted us to pray with her. And so, but that was the same way, that physical touch in that community, that moment of where we stood and prayed as I prayed and she translated, and then the lady that was standing there as we were praying over her, how important that is.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this in the documentary, but the baptisms were at least for me, the most impactful thing. Just getting to hear their stories before and how much they wanted to be baptized.
Yeah.
Because they went through a whole process with Bob and Noemi and counseling and all of that in order to be baptized. Right. And so for us here, most times it's not that intensive of a process. And so the fact that they wanted it enough and they were not ashamed and they were excited, and the joy that came after it, it truly, it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a baptism like that before.
Yeah, me neither. That was sweet. That was one of my favorite times or experiences there. I think my most impactful moment was on the drive back to the airport, or back to Managua rather, with Bob, because I'm in the truck and Bob's constantly checking on Noemi. He's calling her like every hour. Noemi, where are you? How close are you? Don't forget to take this road. Just checking in on her, and it's so sweet. But for the maternity home, they were trying to, after we left, basically roll out this project that they had to finish before Jordy and Sarita went back. And he called her, and she was still not recuperated from being sick. And he's like, what are you doing? Can't you get somebody else to help you? And she's like, Bob, no. She's like, I know the people. Nobody can get the fabric, or no one's going to respect somebody else getting the fabric like they will me. I know who to go to. I know how to do this. She just straight up told him, she was like, no. And it was weird because he was caring for her and wanted to have her kind of care for her body and recover a little bit more. So you're seeing that side of, you need to take care of yourself physically, and he's urging her to do that. But then you see the service side of her saying, Bob, no, they don't know Jordy and Sarita don't know the people like I do. I have to go with them. And you're like, oh man, it just kind of puts in your head, are you doing enough? You know what I mean? She's giving herself fully, even when she doesn't feel totally up to it. But she knew that she understood the people better, and that she had to go with them to get all of the products that they needed. So for me, that was just a very convicting but impactful, big one, I think. But Jeff.
It was probably passing out the food, bringing the food to the families. It was just because you did see the need for it. I mean, it wasn't like they were just getting extra. This is what all they were going to have. And it was, plus it was, the simple stuff that I don't know how much it costs down there. Like, I didn't go with y'all to buy it, but I mean, couldn't have been more than $5 worth of rice and beans and or stuff here. As far as like, even that buys a lot of it, but that's all it costs as far as type of thing. And it was just, and to some of the links we had to go to get to those houses, especially hiking through the countryside or the jungle side, whatever you want to call it. But, and that was probably the most impactful to me. So,
Yeah. That was a special one too. Although I'm sad I missed out on the bigger the bigger excursion day, because that one seemed super fun. But and you guys got to see like a different part. Was it different geographically, or like the homes, were they very similar to what you had seen previously in the week?
At the outer skirts of the town, they were similar to those.
Okay.
And the mountainsides were pretty much just, if you just kept going over the hills that we were looking at every day. If you just there was a more jungle aspect of parts of it.
And there was no electricity out there. Like, it had only been run to the feeding center like a couple weeks prior.
Oh, wow.
So at least in town, some of what their homes had some sort of electrical cord that we would deem very unsafe, clear out, to have a couple lights in their house between houses to an electric, a place to get electric. But out there was none.
Okay.
There was none of that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and opposed to just like going uphill, at least we went like more in Rancho Grande. But out there, it was like you're slowly going up the side of a mountain. And I mean, in the rain, it was difficult, but I can imagine just the treks that people take. And like, if you're not feeling well and you have to, go see someone or whatever, like, I can't imagine doing that every day or to get what you need. So,
Yeah. And I think that it might've been you or Matt, Jeff, that said people in America pay for these types of excursions, and we're just getting it on mission. So that was kind of a cool thing that you guys brought back and shared. But and it's so funny too, because you guys were drenched, you were dirty, but yet you were not unhappy one bit with the adventures that day. So, but okay. So then, as we're kind of bringing it to a wrap, what about mission trips, or even like specifically this one, if you can, challenges you? Like, how did it challenge you, either in your relationship, in your faith, or like for your future tasks, do you think?
Well, for me, I did not anticipate like translating as much as I did. And honestly, at first I wasn't very excited about it. And I was like, okay, wait, like it just gave me a reality check. This is not about me. Yeah. Like, I'm not here to, put an image for myself up there and translate perfectly. And, I'm there to serve. And so I was like, okay, once I changed my mind, like, this is not about me at all. I'm not going to worry about whether it's a perfect translation or whether, people are looking at me funny or whatever. I'm just going to do what God has, shown me that I need to do. So for me, it was like, Abby, get over yourself kind of thing. But,
Just reaching out. I think one thing that challenged me was like reaching out to people who don't know Jesus or need Jesus, not being afraid to start those conversations with people that you work with, that you around a lot of times, just in the community, especially just on a community basis. Like, it's kind of easier in a way to go off to places where you don't know, because it's kind of,
it is.
you have nothing to lose out there.
Yeah.
But just as far as like just with the community around you, just how you saw the way the community reacted to Noemi and her like project. Do you still have the impact in your like small circles type of thing? So that was kind of like that, and obviously the need to up my prayer life.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big one.
And that's kind of what stuck out to me as far as to a challenge to me was start where I am, which is what Noemi did with her feeding centers. But then she gradually over the years has just continued to build relationships with people. And in those relationships, this one led to that. And the challenges that they've had have not kept them. from doing what God wants them to do. And I think it's very easy for me to say, I'm tired, I have my job to do, I have this, or I need to do that. And instead it should be, okay, God, what do you want me to do today for you? Because that's where they were. Whether it was helping one of those kids at the school with showing them what relationship should be or whatever, it was everything was focused on what God wants for them to do to make the biggest impact. And I think my idea of that not being about me and about being the impact and asking myself, what impact am I making for you, God, has been a big question that I've had to ask myself. And some of those moments have been really hard.
Yeah. Well, and like making an impact and being bold in the circles that you do have. Like Joy in the documentary said that with the feeding center, Noemi was reaching that holistic physical need,
Yes.
but she didn't feed them until she gave them a Bible story.
Yes.
Like, how do we pull that, even just that simple concept, you know, into our circles? Because sharing the gospel, we shouldn't be intimidated. It, to me, 100% easier for me to travel to another country and say, let me tell you about Jesus, than it is to me to walk up to somebody, you know, in Parkersburg or pray for my waitress at a restaurant. Like, I just get so fearful and intimidated, and it shouldn't be that way, because most likely they are not going to like retaliate. If they say no thanks, then okay. But if I don't try, you know, I'm not even giving their a chance to be impact. Yeah. So those are really, really good points. Mine was basically the Noemi moment in the truck. So I don't have anything new to add. Although I'm really shocked to say you didn't say your favorite moment was 5:15 in the morning every time you got coffee, because you loved their coffee.
It was really good.
Or you saying that you're tired just now and knowing the amount of coffee you drink. So,
Maybe just a little bit. I wasn't the only one, okay?
oh no, you weren't.
It was
We
a
were
lot
there.
of coffee, and the fact that she made coffee more like, I know they use that local coffee, and she made coffee like she would have back home, what is it, Peru, where she was from. So it was thicker, it was stronger. And then when the lady that cooked for us made a more American
American-style
coffee, and we were
coffee.
all like, we don't like this. And it was kind of fun. Those kind of moments, you know, that was the only thing I wanted to bring back was some coffee.
Yeah.
And those experiences, obviously, but that was something that, you know, every culture has that's different than us. We don't buy coffee here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that kitchen was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful place because, you know, in that kitchen, so much prayer had occurred.
Yeah.
And it was a neat place to go to, not just for the coffee, but the prayer in that room was, and the, you know, that Noemi sits there, and, you know,
Yeah.
you did too, and so did others.
Yeah. Yeah, those were the wee hours of the morning when we couldn't sleep or whatever. But, okay. So then to finish, if someone was hesitant or on the fence about going on a mission trip, what would you say to them? Whether that's encouraging or not. Like, what would your words be?
Go.
Yeah, just go. Yeah, don't think about it. Just
G-O.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go till the door closes. Go through the process. Get ready. And just like for me, the first trip for you guys to go to the Dominican Republic was a very clear, this is not the time you're supposed to go. Don't know why. There's still things that, you know, that occurred while you guys were gone, and I kept thinking, I want to go. But there's a clear go. But if we're open to what God wants us to do, why not? And don't let what looks like that financial burden be the reason you don't go. Because I'm telling you, I look at what's happening for Kentucky next year, and I looked at that, the cost, and I'm like, hey, I got a year. Whether it's easy for me to write the check today, or it's easy for me, or it's something that I'm going to have to put away a little each week till I get there, don't let that part go, because God tells us to go. And you know, as Bob said, some of us go across the street, some of us go across the sea. Well, you know, we can go a couple states away and make an impact. And having that experience will forever change your perspective in your own walk to the where God can use you and teach you every single time. 30 years ago, when I got to experience it the first time, my thought was, I can now pray better for these people that are here and support in a way that I can ship things to them. I can pray for them. I can do there. Well, then as God moves, you learn so many things about yourself through these. It's not always about what you are doing for someone else.
Oh, yeah.
God teaches you in those moments in ways that you just are so unexpected.
Well, and I think that some people, they just go into thinking about mission trips, whether short term or a little bit longer, like with a wrong mindset. They're like, oh, well, I can't afford this, or what about me? What about that? It's not about you. Like, you're making the sacrifice to go serve and encourage the people there. Like, if you're realistically, if it's a short-term trip, you're not going to go change someone's life, but God is going to change those local people's lives through who's already there. But you can still plug into that and play a part in encouraging. And like Bob and Noemi hadn't had a mission trip group since 2020, and then they had their first one in March or April, and then it was us. And so they just said that it was so nice to have people come and join them and help them, because you see all that they do. So it was so nice to have help in what they were doing in their daily ministry. And they need fed too. Like, they get tired and worn out. So it's not about them. Like, unless you have the explicit no, you go. I like that, Jennifer.
Yeah. My dad used to work for a missions board, and he always told us that he'd never had somebody not go on a trip because of money. Because if God wants you to go on that trip, he's going to provide a way for that to happen. And that's true. He's never had anyone not be able to go because of money, because there's always opportunities for fundraising and things you can do. But I think also for missions trips, you never know what's going to happen on the trip, whether it's what you do or what you receive serving. Because if I wouldn't have gone on the Dominican Republic trip, I wouldn't have met my husband.
I was just going to say, we'll meet your husband.
Right. Like, I would be single right now, probably. So, God can really work in you. And, I didn't expect to meet my husband there. I expected to just go and serve, and then I was blessed. So.
Yeah, I still have the picture of your first date, by the way.
Right.
Whether you knew it was your first date or not.
Date, but okay.
Oh, I did. We were all planning.
We all said it was the first date. Yeah.
I don't know. We were just like talking about golf and like.
Jordan was like, "I'm gonna talk to her more tonight."
Oh my goodness. That was fine.
We're
married now.
It was
so
so
it's
sweet.
fine.
Anyway, Jeff, what about you? What would you tell somebody?
Yeah, it's not about you, and you shouldn't go in thinking that way, but it will be life-changing. Like, it's going to be something that's you're going to pick up a lot from going on that trip. You're going to be challenged, but you're going to walk away with a totally different perspective, not just on, like, the world, on life itself, like how to react to different things, on what's important and what's not. And it could be anything from, how we look at food, how we look at prayer. And one of the funny things that I took from this past trip just was how I looked at when it started raining.
Yeah.
Like, before, people.
Gosh, it's raining.
Yeah, it's raining. You can't go do anything outside, or if it rains, it ruins your day. Like, you immediately get an umbrella, stuff like that. And down there, it was kind of just like, oh, it's the wind's blowing now, so
keep going.
It's just it's as simple as that. It's like, it wasn't like they were getting wet. They were just still gotta do what you gotta do. But it was just such a non-issue. Whereas it seems like here it's a lot bigger issue, or at least in other areas, and that just simple stuff like that. But then life-changing stuff like that, where you give people, like, the food to live the next day, and then being a part of that, and so just definitely go.
Yeah. Our group's gonna get texts from Jeff saying, "Let's go take a walk in the rain."
Let's dance
I'm not
in the
saying
rain.
that, but
In
I'm
the
just
rain.
saying my perspective about if I get caught in the rain.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it.
Caught in the
Or not
rain, that's a
worried
good-
about its word, but just it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like my message is kind of the same every time, but like, people matter. It's not about you, but people matter. And God can teach you so much in your culture, but he can teach you a lot when you go to other cultures, because we can live in a bubble and only be exposed to certain things. But when we step out of our comfort zone and our country, if it's international trip, like he can you just learn so much, and people are people and they're his no matter where they live. So and he cares about their hearts. So I would say that, like, if people matter to you, then you go. But that also applies here in the States. Say locally, if they matter to you, then at the dinner table you pray with your family before you eat. You still do that if you're out at the restaurant with friends who maybe aren't Christians. You still take the chance. You go to Kentucky. Like, just because United States doesn't just have one culture. Like, that's another thing. There are multiple cultures within a single society. So you have the chance to impact here in numerous ways too, and learn in numerous ways. And, to spread the gospel, you have to be receptive to those kinds of things, and you have to be willing to learn about them. So, but yeah, I think that would be mine. Anything else from you guys? Last minute thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, thanks for coming and chipping into this, round table discussion, as I've called it. But appreciate it. Appreciate you guys, of course, going on the trip. It's a huge blessing. And, I hope you will encourage people to go on the next one, if you're not yourself. But next trip is in summer 2024. I was like, what's the year now? Okay. But summer 2024, in July, the church is going to be taking a group to Kentucky, outside Harlan, doing VBS-like activities. Going to be a super fun week. Get to stay in the U.S. and see a different side to trips probably than what we've been used to the past couple of years, but it's still going to be awesome. So applications for that due October 31st of 2023, just so we can plan accordingly and move from there to plan activities. So just help encourage people to apply for that, and everything's on the website. But other than that, thanks for joining me, guys.
Yep.